said was right. Our 200K prediction, the sort of basis of that was there's this fundamental bull thesis of institutional investment and regulatory that was going to push prices up.
Crypto may feel quiet, but the ambition hasn't disappeared. It's shifting. While price action lagged in 2025, the foundations were radically strengthened. ETFs absorbed more than new supply, institutions moved from curiosity to allocation, and regulation finally began to unlock tokenization, stablecoins, and on-chain finance. Bitcoin is breaking old cycles, volatility is falling, and crypto-specific fundamentals are starting to matter more than macro. From prediction markets to on-chain vaults, new categories are emerging. The disconnect between sentiment and reality is stark. If anything, the industry isn't too bullish. It's not bullish enough about what's coming next.
We thought we would get above 100K and go to the next behavioral sell wall, which I thought would be 200K. So that's the next round number. I think one 50,000 foot way to look back at 2025 is to say, turns out 100K was a big behavioral sell wall. And it took us a year to get over it. I think we will get over it and move on. But I think I underestimated the number of people who would sell at 100K to get ahead of the 4-year cycle. And that kept prices from releasing from that gravity around there. One sort of de-SPACing today as we're recording. So there's a lot. We had what were the biggest ones? I mean, we had Circle, we had Figure.
Circle is huge, yeah.
We had a huge year. It's sort of a year of maturity of crypto equities. We run a crypto equity ETF, and it was the year of replacing like Bitfufu with Circle. And we had this general upgrade of bigger and bigger companies coming into the space, which I think shows the direction of the industry. Buying of gold started in 2022. And they bought a lot of gold in 22, 23, 24. It wasn't until 25 that we had that huge run up. And the reason was people were willing to sell to fill that demand for those first few years. But eventually we exhausted those sellers and the price went up. What's happening in Bitcoin right now is that institutions via ETFs are buying more than 100% of the supply. And they did it in 24, and they're going to do it in 25, 8 meetings with us. If they started those meetings,
you have to suffer through 8 meetings with the same person before they give you
not
money?
Suffering. I'm sure it's a pleasure.
Man. Welcome to Crypto Land. But here's the thing. If you started those meetings when the Bitcoin ETF launched, January 2024, and you did them quarterly, guess what? Your 8th meeting was this quarter. Right? Like we're just in the sweet spot of adoption. I know that's hard for people to, but we've been doing this a Bitwise for 8 years. So that's like a fair.
I'm so glad you guys have been doing that.
Yeah. 8 years feels like 100. But that is true. So look, I think ETF growth will go up. The comparison to the net new supply is because I'm a very simple person. Like crypto prices are set by supply and demand. You have one crypto.
I have an anecdote that I'm pretty sure places itself pretty well into what you're talking about and kind of the recent history of these ETFs. Ever since the ETFs launched, I've increasingly run into people who are not in the crypto space. They're not crypto people, but nonetheless, they know about crypto and they have invested in crypto. And maybe they got in on a previous cycle and they like invested in like Dentacoin or Dogecoin, and they like rode the volatility up and down, and then they got burned. But these same people, I've noticed this multiple times, especially during my travels down in Argentina, which is like kind of a couple years ahead of crypto adoption. So many times I have heard these same people or same
all about it.
Number 4, crypto equities will outperform tech equities. It feels like this year was the first time we actually got some big crypto equities. Talk about this one. What do you think is going to happen next year?
I think we're going to continue to see a trend that we've seen over the past 3+ years, which is that crypto equities have outperformed tech equities in the aggregate by multiple orders of magnitude. We have this widening group of crypto equities that we spoke about a bit earlier. You now have Circle and Figure and other pure play crypto equities that we didn't really have 1, 2, or 3 years ago.
On some of these crypto native companies. And I'm wondering next year and maybe the year after, whether the opposite might start to become true, whether the institutions might be like, oh, I actually need some crypto native tokens in order to capture the upside of crypto that aren't available in my, brokerage TradFi account. And this is kind of I guess an additional question on
I don't know. You can get tangential exposure by owning things related to stablecoins, because that will, of course, have to scale as Polymarket scales. You can get tangential exposure by owning layer one blockchains, because those things start to scale. But it's hard to get direct exposure without underlying exposure to the equity, as far as I know. I do think it's good broadly for crypto, but the specific tie-in, we're going to, get too in the weeds. The specific tie-in is
Right.
relatively limited. It just grows it up.
Do people actually ask that question? Are they expressing that level of interest in prediction markets, or is that just my imagination?
I haven't heard them express that level of interest. I think those people are probably talking to the VC side of the equation. Cool. An analogy backments do. So I think not enough people think about it from that perspective. We've seen some emerging market economies form task forces to study stablecoins. They're now getting of a size where you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, where you're really talking about high impacts on commercial activity. I'm sure, David, you saw in Argentina significant stablecoin use. It's really penetrated there. It's penetrated in places like Nigeria. You see it in other places. I think we might see someone blame stablecoins for harming their current. We might see countries try to ban stablecoins. I think we've gotten to the size that we're big enough that we matter. And I think you'll start to see the other side of that come into the equation.
Well, if you project that a little bit further, you wonder how successful they will actually be. I mean, stablecoins and crypto adoption is very much a bottom-up phenomenon. That's what the Bankless
invest in stocks that might deliver total returns. A vault curator will take in stablecoins and invest in yield-bearing DeFi protocols or generate total returns through some sort of strategy. We think it's the way that asset management will exist when we are in this fully on-chain world. We think Bitwise will be a vault manager as much as it is an ETF manager. And vault sort of emerged in 2024 from effectively nothing, and assets ramped to about $2 billion. They continued to run up in 2025. They hit almost $9 billion. That's a pretty reasonable size. And then they washed out in the October volatility spike. And a
chain of vault AUM would flip Bitwise's off-chain ETF AUM.
I don't know. I'm bullish on both. I'm not going to be able to be pinned down on that. I do think this is a really big deal. It is something that we're looking at. No commitments from Bitwise here. I do think it is one of the ways asset management works in the future. So maybe we'll come back on the show next year with a prediction like that.
All right, we're just not ready for that one.
I would just add to that, to your point, David. Bitwise is already on managing assets on chain. We have been now for a number of,
but there is a contingency here in parentheses. If the Clarity Act passes, ETH and Sol, new all-time highs, dependent on the Clarity Act passing. You already called for Bitcoin all-time highs this year. So clearly we've discussed, do not believe in the 4-year cycle, believe that next year, 2026, will be bullish. ETH and Solana won't just hit all-time highs. They'll only do Clarity Act done next year?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think we have better than even odds, but they're not at 100%. To some extent, it's become personal. To some extent, it's hung up on how many limitations there are on White House activity in the crypto market. And that makes me worried, because that can be a place where the two parties just butt heads for reasons that have nothing to do with what's best for America, and instead are sort of personal bias issues. I'm hopeful we can get it through. If you had me to put odds, I'd put it like something like 60%. Some people say it's a little bit higher than that. Investing in Bitcoin, it validates it for every institutional investor. The fact that Harvard allocated was brought up in my conversation with a sovereign wealth fund today. The fact that Harvard allocated was brought up the last time I was on a national accounts platform. It really does matter, because it's seen as a leading light. So this is a big deal.
So they're institutional KOLs, basically.
That's exactly what they are. That's exactly what they are. Well said. Yes.
Okay,
we're marching down that roadmap. We think over 100 crypto-linked ETPs will launch next year. I think those will be spot crypto, index, equities, smart beta, momentum, all kinds of things. And it matters for investors because now they have a big menu to choose from on how they want to allocate. You can imagine an investor is like going to a restaurant and having like 2 things on the menu. They're not going to be very excited about it, and it's not going to be a very great experience. But now they're going to go and have a menu that's like the Cheesecake Factory of ETPs, where it's like more than you could possibly choose.
Legitimate and bubbles up. it goes into the index. But it's always screened by the professional team at Bitwise. So I love it. Yeah, it's the solution to the pesky relative who wants to ask you about Cardano.
Yes. Is Cardano in there, by the way?
BITW. You have to go
It's
look
in there?
at the assets.
It is. Cardano's in there. Litecoin's in there. Chainlink's in there. So you're capturing a few things that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but they're in there.
Specific to ETH will drive ETH. Things specific to Chainlink will drive Chainlink. I think those will be more important than they have been in the past, when what really mattered the most was just the macro liquidity conditions. So if you think the relative importance of the real world use of crypto is rising, then you think correlations are going down. And just to put a pin on this conversation about why this matters, we've covered sort of three things about crypto's returns in 2026. We started by saying